Dean, we're going to get started.
Okay.
You guys, welcome. Hi, Glenn. Good to see you all on here. I'm sure more people will come on as we get started. My name is Vicki Perry. For those of you who we haven't met, I am the Executive Director of CYREA. Welcome. Equity Trust is our speaker tonight, Dean with Equity Trust. And Equity Trust has been a partner with CYREA, I don't know, at least 10 years. They were part of the group before I became executive director, and that's going on 6 years now. So it's been a long time. The other thing is, I can tell you that at least a third and maybe more, but of the people who are doing self-directed IRAs in our club, I bet a third to half use Equity Trust. So that comes with a big voice of endorsement. So with that being said, Dean, I'm going to get rid of my picture, my sound, and turn it over to you.
Vicki, I'm going to pop up my, before you leave there, just make sure you can see my presentation. Let's see, can you see it?
Not yet.
All right, let me go back to share and see why it didn't share. Try that again.
It's up, there we come. So now we can, there you go.
All right.
All right.
Yep, all right, we're good to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Well, hey, first of all, I want to thank Vicki and CYREA for inviting me this evening for the webinar. I'm Dean Manzetti, National Speaker and Business Development Facilitator with Equity Trust, and I'm going to be spending about the next 30 minutes here with everybody talking to you about self-directed IRAs and a couple special things we have coming up. So real quick, go over our agenda. We'll be talking about just exactly what is a self-directed IRA. There's 7 different types, but obviously due to time constraints, we're not going to go over all 7. But I can tell you we got some exciting news, how you can get some more information on the ones that we won't be discussing tonight. But I've got about 4 or 5 quick case studies that I'm going to share with everybody tonight. They're actual clients of ours, of people like yourself, what they've done. Then as we wrap it up, we'll talk about, anybody interested in learning a little bit more, how easy it is, and then exactly who Equity Trust is. And I'd encourage you to take notes this evening. But first thing I want to let everybody know, we have got coming up here, it's next Saturday, January 23rd. We call them our wealth building workshops. And actually, this is a little different than what we've done in the past. And by the way, this is totally 100% free, number one. And number two, so I want to make it real clear with everybody. I'm not here to sell you anything tonight, and we're not here to sell you anything on the webinar next week. So let's get that out of the way because we don't have anything to sell. Our job is to educate you, and that's what we're going to be doing next week on January 23rd. My partner, John Bowens, another national speaker with us, he's going to be talking about 401ks and private equity and JVs. And I'm going to talk a little bit more throughout our presentation this evening as to, signups, obviously, as you can see, are for free there. If you go to the chat feature, I have put the link in there. You can register for free. And I hope to get everybody on the call this evening to register for this event. And I'll talk throughout the next 30 minutes about that event and some of the things John will be covering. But first things first, we do have the chat feature open. And real quick, while it's on my mind, if you've got any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. And then, of course, I'll be hanging around at the end here to answer any additional questions that you may have. I'll stay around as long as I have to. But first of all, as a thank you, number one, for everybody joining me this evening, I'd like everybody to put into the chat feature. You can either email me down there on the bottom, d.manzetti@trustetc.com. That's in the chat, or put in the chat feature. Give me your first name, your last name, your email, and your phone number. A couple reasons. Number one, I want to get you registered for free for the event. But number two, I'm going to send this to everybody. I've got a couple free giveaways, and that's what we're known for here at Equity Trust, is our free educational material. Number one, I'm going to send this out to everybody on the call this evening, as long as you put that information in the chat for me. Again, your name, your email, your phone number. The Ultimate Real Estate Investors Resource Guide. It's a 21-page PDF. Great for investors, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, whether you're experienced, a lot of strategies in there. how to do some things. There's some tips in there from some other educators and some other real estate investors. That's number one. Number two, and I don't do this too often on webinars. Normally when I'm live, I do this. We have a book. In this book here, Self-Directed IRAs, Building Retirement Wealth Through Alternative Investing. This is a book. It's about 260 pages, written by our founder, Mr. Dick Desich. Again, you go into the chat, give me your name, your email, your phone number. I'm going to send you a free copy of this book. Again, another piece of great educational material for joining us tonight and signing up for our webinar that's coming up. First thing I'd like everybody to do, though, because you're going to hear me talking about this tonight, you're going to hear John Bowens on January 23rd during our workshop talking a lot about this. Compounding interest in the absence of taxation. What exactly does that mean? Well, what that means is, and we're going to talk a little bit tonight, and John will share even more detail on it. How do I take my money from the taxable bucket and get it into the tax-free or the tax-deferred bucket? And yes, there is a difference between the tax-free and tax-deferred. And we're going to be talking about that this evening. And John's going to be sharing some pretty cool stuff too about how you can do that. But as we get started here, real quick disclaimer. As I mentioned, I am here for educational purposes only. We are not here to give you any tax, legal, or financial advice. So I want to make that very clear. And of course, you know, anytime that you do investments, open up IRAs, what have you, we always tell you that you should always work with your financial professional when making any type of an investment or product or strategy. So what is a self-directed IRA? Well, it's an industry term. It's a term that we came up here in the industry. As I mentioned, you know, our founder was Dick Desich, and Dick Desich was one of the very first people back in the early 80s, one of the very first in the United States actually to ever do a self-directed IRA. And really the difference between a self-directed IRA and a non-self-directed IRA, they're very similar, but the difference being, if you know, a traditional one, you're investing in your stocks, bonds, and mutual funds with a brokerage firm. With self-directed IRA, you're investing in what we call alternative asset investing, which is things such as real estate and real estate notes. Now, these are the 7 different types that are available out there. As I mentioned earlier, we're not going to be going over all 7 of them, obviously, tonight. But I am going to cover the top 2, the traditional and the Roth, and the bottom 2, the CISA and the HSA. Number 1, as far as qualifications go, you have to have earned income to open up any of these accounts. Now, the 3 in the middle, John will be going into great detail, especially on that solo 401k there, as you can see, the third one in the green. That one is, and really the simple and the SEP too. These 3 are for self-employed folks. And the biggest differentiator between those and the other 4 I'm going to talk about is your contribution limits, as you can see there. You can put a lot more money in the solo 401k, and there's a lot more value and upside to the solo 401k. As you can see, depending on your age, you can get up to $64,500 in the solo, which, you know, the contribution limits in the other ones are not that high. So you're talking almost 10 times as much. So again, John's going to be getting into great detail during the webinar, really talking about that solo 140K and, you know, the value and the advantages that that has over some of the other ones. But real quick, just wanted to ask everybody a quick question. You can pop this question into the chat if you think you know the answer, and I'll give it to you as we go along. But if you had your tax advantage choice, would you rather tax a seed, or would you rather tax the crop? And I'm not going to give you the answer right now, but you're going to find out what you'd rather do, tax a seed or tax the crop, here in about the next few minutes. But wanted to show you an example here of an IRA versus a non-IRA investment. The starting principal, we use same parameters for both. Starting principal, $20,000 invested over a 20-year time period with an annual return rate of 12%. And the taxation during that time period was 25%. As you can see, the person on the left there that was a non-IRA, they had accumulated $112,000. The person on the right, about $80,000 more, $192,000. Now that $80,000 difference could be tax-free or tax-deferred. And we're going to talk about what the difference between the tax-free and tax-deferred here is in a minute. But real quick, just wanted to let everybody know about this book that I read. My comrades here at Equity Trust turned me on to this book a couple years ago. It's called The Power of Zero by David McKnight. It's a pretty quick read, about 3 hours. think it's about 12, 13 bucks on Amazon. David talks about what I'm going to be talking about this evening, and talks about the illustration there, compounding interest in the absence of taxation, and how you can take your money from the taxable bucket and get it into the tax-free bucket. So when you reach at retirement age, start making withdrawals, none of your income is ever hitting your 1040, and all that income is 100% tax-free. So I'd encourage you get a chance to get that book. But let's start off with our traditional IRA. And again, I'm going to give you the basic 101s with these IRAs tonight. John will expand a little bit more, give you more of the meat and potatoes on Saturday, the 23rd. But with our first one there, traditional, it could be some, a 401k that maybe you've already got at work, depending where you work, could be a 403b, a 457, a TSP, working for the government or school system, a pension. If you're self-employed, you may have a simple or a SEP. Now, the maximum out of pocket, depending on your age, and this did not change this year. It hasn't changed for a couple of years. They kept it the same. The maximum out of pocket that you can contribute to a traditional IRA is $6,000 for under 50, $7,000 for over 50. You do have a spousal contribution with the traditional. If you're not familiar with the spousal contribution, what that means is, remember we talked about you have to have earned income. As long as you or your spouse, one of the two of you, are working, you are both eligible to contribute to a traditional IRA. So if you're 45 years old and you work, but your spouse does not, you can put in 6,000, your spouse can put in 6,000. Now, you are required at the age of 72, there's a thing called RMD, that's required minimum distribution. Remember we talked about taxing the seed or taxing the crop. Well, you haven't paid any taxes on the traditional IRA because you've been getting some tax benefits. So eventually the IRS wants their money. Well, now at the age of 72, if you haven't been making withdrawals, you are forced to take withdrawals at the minimum required withdrawals at the age of 72 for the traditional IRAs. As you can see, the way they work, they're tax deferred. You put your money in on the front end, they go in tax exempt. You reach the age of 59 and a half, you can now start making distributions. But a couple things you need to know. Number one, if you do it prior to 59 and a half, you are going to pay a 10% penalty. And you are going to be responsible for taxes. This is taxing the crop because you were getting the tax write-off on the front end. You haven't paid taxes, so you're going to pay ordinary income tax, whatever your effective tax rate is. So, for example, let's say you wanted to withdraw $100,000 out your first year. You fall under the 20% effective tax rate. That 100,000 is going to hit your 1040. You're going to be responsible for paying $20,000 in taxes or whatever your effective tax rate is. Now, there is a better way to go about that, and this is called the Roth IRA, as you can see there by Mr. William Roth, senator from Delaware. Came out with this in about 1998. Very similar to the traditional. The maximum out of pocket's exactly the same, 6 or 7,000, depending on your age. Also has a spousal contribution. The great thing about the Roth, there are no required minimum distributions. So you can continue to invest in a Roth forever and number one, forever and ever and ever. And as a matter of fact, in the traditionals, you can also do that with the traditionals, but there are no required minimum distributions on the Roth. So you don't have to worry about that age 72. It does not apply to the Roth. You can have that forever and ever and ever, and will it to somebody down your family tree if you'd like. But there are no required minimum distributions. This is how the Roth works, okay? With the Roth, your money that you're putting in on the front end, that's where you pay the taxes. This is taxing the seed. You're getting the taxes out of the way in the front end. So you put your money in on the front end. Now your money goes in tax exempt. It's tax-free growth. You reach the age of 59 and a half. You can now start making distributions out of there. That money never hits your 1040, and you never pay income tax on that money in the Roth. One of the best accounts out there. Now, a couple things you need to know about the Roth, because a lot of people will say, well, Dean, I've been told that I make too much money. I'm ineligible to open up in a Roth. That is true. There is a thing called contribution eligibility MAGI requirements. That's modified adjusted gross income. If you're single, as you can see there, depending on how much you make, if you make up to 125,000, you can put that full 6 or 7,000. If you make between 125 and 140, you can only do a partial. Unfortunately, if you make over $140,000, you cannot contribute to a Roth. Same with married folks. 198 is that number for married people, the full contribution. 198 to 208 is a small partial. and over 208, you cannot convert to a Roth. But there are a couple ways around this, and John will get into a little bit more detail. I'm going to talk about one of the ways, which is called a backdoor contribution. So it's a conversion is what we call it. So let's say that you've already got an IRA established out there somewhere, or you've got maybe a 401k from an old company that you used to work for. We can take that money, we can convert it over. But remember, we talked about taxing the seed. You are going to be responsible for paying taxes in it. So let's say you had 100,000 sitting out there in a plan, and you say, Dean, I'd love to get that over to a Roth. This is how we bypass that MAGI requirements there. We take the money out of that, we convert it over into the Roth. But again, depending on what your tax rate is, that amount converted is going to be added to your ordinary income, and you are going to be responsible for paying taxes on it. Now, there's another way to do this. In case you can't afford to pay all that tax, you can do what's called a partial conversion. You can take partial amounts of money out and convert it over. So for example, in this one, let's say, well, I can only afford to pay $10,000 in taxes under my 20% effective tax rate. Well, that's great. Let's take $50,000 out of there. 20% of 50 is $10,000. Pay the $10,000, get the money into the Roth. You've now got the $50,000 into the Roth to go to work for you. We can convert the balance of that $50,000 next year, the following year, whenever. There's no restrictions on to how many times you can do the conversion or how long that conversion that you takes. And again, this is something that we here at Equity Trust can talk to you about. We do offer free consultations. This is something you'd be interested in. We'd be glad to set that free consultation and talk to you about it. And again, John will get into a little bit more deeper dive detail on that 23rd webinar coming up. Third one I want to talk about here real quick before we get into our case studies is our HSA, Health Savings Account. And this is really one of the best small accounts out there. It's got to be used with a high deductible health plan. Contribution limits are a little bit different. The age is a little bit different. That age is 55. If you're under 55 and single, you can put in 3,600. Over 55, it's 4,600, and those numbers double for a family, okay? Money goes in on the front end of the account. Number one, you're getting a tax deduction on that. Money goes into the savings account. It's tax deferred growth. Number two, now when you make distributions on this, as long as you're using it for qualified medical expenses, it's tax-free. This is the only account out there. It's a triple tax advantage. You get tax deductions on deposits, tax deferred growth, tax-free once you take that money out to use for medical care. Last one is CSUB, Coverdale Education Account, a little smaller limit, $2,000, pretty self-explanatory, can be used from K all the way through graduate school, grows tax-free as long as it's used for educational purposes. Pretty much just like the previous one that I just talked about. The only difference is if your child continues to have this beyond the age of, beyond the age of 18, up to the age of 30, they do have to start making distributions at the age of 30 on this account. And the last thing is, if you have a special needs child, the age of 30 does not apply to that special needs child. So let's talk about the different ways that you can partner. And John's going to be talking about different ways to partner than I am tonight. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to partner. There's really 10 different ways, and really more than that, but these are the 10 most common ones that are out there. And I'm going to share exactly, how you can do that, because that's what you can do with these things. You can partner these things with your spouse, with your kids, with your grandkids, with your neighbor, with other people's accounts, and very, very popular doing it that way. So the first one I want to go over is our family model, Jan, Gary, and Brittany. They are from the St. Louis area. They came to us about 13 years ago. Jan's very seasoned real estate agent, and they decided at that point in time they had a little over $100,000 in a traditional IRA that they had. They wanted to get it into a self-directed IRA. They wanted to start using it to buy and sell property, and they decided, and they also wanted to get it into a Roth to get the tax-free growth and not have to worry about paying taxes when they're ready to retire. And that's what they did, opened up an account for the three of them. And this is about their 6th or 7th deal, Ladue Estates, and I'm going to share with you right here. Now, follow very closely on these, because when you're doing these deals with what's called a disqualified person, those are people up and down the linear tree, you have to make sure you're doing it properly according to the IRS guidelines so you can deal with a disqualified person. And what that means is the deal has to be done proportionately. The money that goes out to the deal has to proportionately be the money that comes back into the deal, and split up accordingly. And that's what those percentages, as you can see there. So let me break it down into a little bit more detail, tell you what we're talking about here. So here's a property that they bought in 2013, about 7 years ago, 8 years ago now, bought the property for $306,000. The way that they split that up, 42% of that was coming out of Jan's, 55 out of Gary's, and 3% out of Brittany's. So there's the breakdown. 168 came out of Gary's, 125 out of Jan's, 9,200 out of Brittany's. Now, there was earnest money down required in the deal. Again, has to be split up proportionately. So that's what that 1,650 is there for Gary's. That's 55% of 3,000. 1,260 is 42% of 3,000 for Jan's earnest money down. And of course, 3% of 3,000 is $90 earnest money down for Brittany. Renovations were involved in the property of 296. Again, has to be split up proportionately. So as you can see there, 163,000 had to come out of Gary's, 124 out of Jan's, and 8,800 out of Brittany's. Now, at the time that they did this, way back 7, 8 years ago, it's a little bit cumbersome, a lot of paperwork back and forth, had to send checks out on their behalf. So it was time consuming and cumbersome. And John will show you a demo and go over this even more detail on our webinar coming up. But we've got our online portal called My Equity. And with My Equity, you can do all of your transactions, all your real estate transactions to be handled 99.9% online. Don't have to worry about doing checks, don't have to worry about paperwork. No need for wet signatures anymore. You've got all your transactions will be up there, everything that you've done, your investments, your accounts. You can even set up your tenants to have their payments go directly into your My Equity portal. This is a free service that when you do open up an account with Equity Trust, we will teach you, give you access to it and train you on it. And you can do all your deals that way. So don't have to worry about paperwork anymore. So a couple before and after pictures. Here's the proceeds of the sale. As you can see, ended up selling for $767,000. And again, that money has to go back into the accounts proportionately. So of the 767, 421 had to go back into Gary's Roth, 322 back into Jan's, and 23,000 back into Brittany's. But more importantly, folks, as you can see, look what they made as a family model, $163,000 they made as a family on just this one deal that they did. Pretty cool. Mark from North Carolina, he was our investor of the year. Mark came to us, learned about us from one of his broker friends, came to us back in 2017, made a couple of investments, and it earned him the investor of the year. And just want to share those real quick with you. First one he ever did was a house rehab. And by the way, Mark was an insurance salesman, so he knew nothing about real estate. He kept going to RIA meetings and engaging and learning and said, hey, I want to, make some money in my retirement. That's what he did here on his first two deals. First one, bought this property for 89, put 64,000 into it, sold it for 200,000 about 14 months later, put $45,000 profit back into his IRA. First deal that the guy ever did. There's just a couple before and after shots. At the same time that deal was going on, he also did a real estate note at the meeting. He was talking to some gentlemen. They needed some money. They were out of funds. They were tearing down some houses, replacing it with 2 houses. They couldn't get a loan. So Mark talked to them. They worked out a deal. Mark gave them a loan of $125,000 for 14 months. They put the property up. They put the 2 homes up, built it, sold it. Mark made a redemption of $199,000. So Mark put $74,000 profit back into his IRA. So his first 2 deals, this was an insurance salesman, first 2 deals he ever did, closed in 2018, made $119,000. And last year in 2019, he closed 3 more deals last year in 2020, well over 100. So Mark's made in a little under 3 years about $250,000 on 5 deals that he made with his self-directed IRA. And the last couple I wanted to share with you here is a local gentleman, Gary. What Gary did here, he did not have enough money in his Roth early on to purchase all of his properties 100% with his Roth. So he partnered with himself. He had the cash, but his goal was to build that Roth up so he could start eventually funding all of his deals 100% out of his Roth. So he found this property, as you can see. The cost of the property was $41,500. He split it 75-25. There's that proportion that we're talking about because he's dealing with himself. So $31,125 came out of his Roth, $10,375 cash. The repairs were $30,000. Again, had to be split up proportionately, 75-25. So $22,500 out of his Roth, $7,500 cash. So roughly $53,000 out of his Roth, about $17,000 cash out of his pocket. Total investment, $71,500. Sold it for $116,000, closing costs of $10,000. But more importantly, he netted, number one, cash profit was $8,600. Number two, for his Roth, he put $25,000 back into his Roth. So he took his Roth on this deal from $53,000 plus the $53,000 went back and the $25,000. Now he's up to $78,000 to go on and move on to his next deal. We call that a rinse, repeat, reload, and reinvest. And you'll hear John mention those things quite a bit because John does that himself a lot, who's going to be doing our webinar next Saturday. Rinse, repeat, reload, and reinvest. So here's another deal that Gary did just recently in the last couple of years. Found this property, and now he is able to, over the years, he's made enough money in his Roth. He is able to fund this 100% out of his Roth. So he purchased it for $68,000, put $20,000 in improvements for a total of $88,000. He's currently renting it out for $900 per unit, $1,800 gross rent. He's netting about $1,400 a month. So over the last 2 years, he's taken in about $35,000 over those 2-year periods in what we call mailbox money. It's got an ARV today of 135 to 145. So if he sold that today at 145, which would go back into his Roth, plus the 35 that he's accumulated, the cash money that he's accumulated, mailbox money over the last 2 years, that's 180. So he initially purchased this thing for $88,000 2 years ago. And if he wanted to, he could sell it today and put 180 back in there, almost double his money in a 2-year period. So those are just some pretty cool case studies that I wanted to share this evening. And John's going to be going over a couple more. He's also going to be showing some small dollar deals because a lot of people say, well, Dean, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money to do this. And John's going to show you some deals where $500, $1,000, how you can turn that into $15,000, $20,000 relatively quickly. They're called JV, joint ventures. And John's going to be talking about that on the 23rd webinar of how you can do a JV or a joint venture along with the solo 401k. So you don't want to miss out on that. For opening up an account, just wanted to get this all out of the way here before we close up. It's pretty easy. It's a 4-step process. You select one of the accounts that we talked about, and this can all be done online. It takes about 24 to 48 hours to do an account open with us. We just take some personal information, but want to stop right there real quick because a lot of people say, oh, Dean, this is great. I'm ready to go. I want to open up an account tonight. Well, unfortunately, folks, until the account is funded, until we get the money in there, we can't do anything. And if you're converting that money over, you're transferring it over, it's coming from somewhere else, you're not putting cash contribution in there. Until that money's in our hands, we can't do anything. We can open up your account in 1 or 2 days, but until it's funded, we can't do anything. So let's get the thing open. Let's get the thing funded. Then let's start making our deals. We talked about rollovers. We talked about transfers. We talked about conversions. You can do just a simple contribution with the $500 minimum. You fill out what's called a DOI, a direction of investment form. That just tells us what your preferred investment is. It gives us details, how much it costs, what it is, where to send the funds, so forth and so on. And don't worry about writing all these investment options down. Again, make sure you send me and put in the chat or email me your name, your email, and your phone number, and I'm going to send you all these investment options. I've got over 100 of them. I'm going to send those 100 investment options to you also for free with the other educational material that we talked about. So make sure you get that information in the chat feature. So as we talked about, it's pretty easy. Open an account, fund an account, make an investment, manage the investment. So a little bit about equity trust. We've been at this since, we started in 1974. As a brokerage service company. We started doing self-directed IRAs in the early 80s, as I mentioned. We've been at it longer than anybody in the industry, hold over $28 billion in assets under custody administration. We do have the platform to do both traditional investing as well as your non-traditional self-directed IRA. We're based in Westlake, Ohio, right next door to you there in beautiful Indiana. about 20 miles to the west of Cleveland. We do business in all 50 states, and we're an IRS approved custodian. So folks, very important that you understand what a custodian is, because there's facilitators, administrators, and custodians out there. So, do your due diligence and do your homework, get that information from whoever you're going to deal with. Hopefully it's with us. Find out, how are they regulated? What is their experience? How long have they been around? Do they meet the IRS requirements? Facilitators and administrators do not. They open up an account, they give you a checkbook, and you're on your own. They don't have the authority to hold your assets, your investments, your property, issue funds. We do all that for you. We're going to open and administer your account, obviously, and they're going to take extra steps to move your funds to and from a custodian if you're working with one of those. So, make sure you do your homework and make sure you ask those questions and do your due diligence. So as far as our customer service folks, we've got very seasoned veteran people. They average over 5 years, have done almost 9,000 investment transactions, with 3,000 of those just being in real estate purchase and sales. We talked about our portfolio management online system, our My Equity, and John will give you a brief demo of that on January 23rd on the free webinar we've got coming up. You get a chance, go visit our website, www.trustetc.com. It's loaded with free education. I'd encourage you to take a look at it out there. And remember, this is one of the free things that you are going to be getting this evening, the Ultimate Real Estate Investors Resource Guide, a 21-page PDF with all kinds of strategies and some tips in there, plus the book that I mentioned that you're going to be getting, that I'm going to be sending you a copy of the book. One last plug here. If you haven't registered, I did put the link in the chat. But again, just email me and I will make sure I get everybody registered, number one, for free. It is 100% free. And really, this could be life-changing for some of you folks out there. It's 90 minutes long. I'd encourage you, take 90 minutes out of your morning, that Saturday morning, get your breakfast, log on to the workshop, and you're going to learn some fantastic information out there from my partner, John Bowens. He's one of the best speakers in this industry that I've ever heard. He's got some great value and great education and great information that he's going to be providing you on this workshop. And again, remember, it's 100% free, and it's more of a training than a workshop. He's going to be training you, and then you're going to have the ability, if you want to continue on learning more and training with us for free, you'll be able to sign up for additional free training classes and additional free consultation. There's no charge for any of this, folks. So I'd really highly encourage everybody there to go ahead and sign up for that. And with that being said, I'm going to close it up. I think I went a couple minutes over, but I'm going to leave my contact information up there again. Just want to let you remind you, there's my email. Make sure you give me your first name, your last name, your email, your phone number, so I can get all of this information to you. And I'm going to go ahead and number one, I'll open it up for questions. And I see Vicky's back, and I'll take a look in the chat feature here and see if anybody happened to put any questions in the chat.
I don't see any questions just yet, John, but I did want, or Dean, sorry, but I did want to mention to everyone, I put it in the chat. John has, and Dean touched on this, but John's been investing in flipping houses for years. And I've heard him talk probably 3 times, and he actually uses real examples of how he puts deals together.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I heard him, I walked away thinking, holy cow, I didn't even think of that. So, and I started investing back in 1981. So you would think I would have heard of everything, but he's really good.
Yeah, he is. And, it's surprising because he's a younger guy, but he's been doing this since he was, before college, when, even when he was young and still in high school, he started doing this, went to college, learned a little bit more. Right out of college, he came to Equity Trust. So this is all he knows. This is all that he knows. But I do see we do have one question there. Can you mix Roth and traditional funds? Glenn, yes, absolutely you can. And that's part of the great part of partnering, Glenn. And John's going to show you some really, really cool ways that you can partner, you know, different funds together, because, you know, you may not have a lot of money, but if you maybe find somebody or a few people that do, and maybe you find the deal, you know, and you guys figure out how you want to, you know, do all that. Absolutely, that's very, very, very popular for being able to do that. Mhm. Yes, you can do that. Let's see, anybody else here? Yeah, and as Vicky said, John's got some really, really cool and unique ideas and things that, you know, number one, to share from clients, but number two, that he's done that, you know, I'm always learning something new from John.
Well, Dean, it looks like everyone is good. I'm hoping that that means they'll all sign up for the webinar on the 23rd. And if I could just real quick remind everybody, the Fliporama is this Saturday. If you are wanting to shadow people on flips and then finance your flip through an equity trust self-directed IRA, it doesn't get any better than that. So Dean, anything last you want to say before we shut this down?
No, that'll close it. I'll go ahead and leave my contact information up there again. And, you know, hey, folks, as I mentioned, you know, just shoot me that information via the chat. I'll get you signed up for free. And like I said, it could be life-changing for some of you out there, some of the information that you're going to learn. I mean, the education that John's going to be providing to you is top-notch, some of the top-notch stuff out there. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't put your information in there, go ahead and put it in there, and hopefully we'll see everybody on the 23rd.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dean.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone, and have a great evening, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Monique.